Okay, well, thanks for coming to the press conference in such a short notice. My name is Terry Jimbo. I'm with the videonews.com, and I'm your moderator today. And in the wake of Mr. Ghosn's rearrest, we have arranged this very urgent press conference by his defense lawyer, Mr. Hironaka, and Mr. Kosasa. And we only have till 3:45. He has to go to another court session at 4 o'clock today, so he has to leave here 3:45 sharp. And as you know, we have a simultaneous interpretation, so we have like a full half an hour today. So let's try to make best use of it. And he will be reading a statement for about, say, 10 to 15 minutes. So we should have at least 15 minutes of Q&A. And just one quick note. This is actually the third press conference by Mr. Hironaka, and we actually hosted a press conference by Mr. Otsuru. So this is the fourth press conference by Mr. Ghosn's defense lawyer. But at the same time, we have actually extended invitations to other parties involved, such as Justice Minister Yamashita and Supreme Court Chief Justice Otani and Prosecutor General Inada. And also, of course, the Nissan CEO, Saikawa. Actually, 3 times we have actually extended an invitation to Mr. Saikawa, 3 times. And they have yet to respond to our request. And we are very happy to host their request if they are willing to speak here. So I just want you to know that. Okay, let's get right to it. Mr. Hironaka, please. Sensei, onegaishimasu.
As you are aware, early this morning, Mr. Carlos Ghosn was arrested once again by the Special Investigation Department of the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office. As had already been reported, this is related to the cases, the charges to which he has been indicted before. It is not a completely new or unrelated charge. Also, as you are aware, on the 5th of March, in the District Court of Tokyo, Mr. Ghosn's release was permitted. Following this, there was also the various conditions put in place by the court. So the court had acknowledged that there was no risk of tampering with evidence or also no risk of flight. This was confirmed clearly by the court at that time. Following this, Mr. Ghosn was released, and following the conditions of his release, he had been working to prepare for the trial together with his defense team, or us. Within the discussions with the courts, we had asked the question about whether there would be a further indictment. We were told upon this question that, well, we cannot say at this stage whether there will be or will not be, but this will be clear by the end of March. However, as it became the 1st of April and there was no contact, we telephoned once again to confirm. At that stage, they said, there is nothing that we can tell you at this time. Therefore, we thought that there was a potential risk or the possibility of rearrest. However, this was not something which we could have predicted. As I just mentioned, Mr. Ghosn also, in regards to this case, the risk of tampering or hiding or destroying evidence is not present. Also, there is no risk of flight. This has been confirmed by the courts because they have already acknowledged this. It's very unusual for a rearrest to happen. To, once again, questions and so on is something which can happen, but to rearrest someone is something very unheard of. To ask for example, more information to be submitted and so on is something which could happen. However, even as we have heard in the reporting today, within the, well, to once again arrest someone who is released under bail is very exceptional. This is a very obvious fact. Someone who is under bail is someone who the court has confirmed, has acknowledged that they are following their conditions of release, conditions of bail, that there is no risk of tampering with evidence or of fleeing. This is something which has been confirmed by the courts. Therefore, arresting them once again, this is something, if it were a completely different case, a completely different charge, that would be one thing, but something related is almost unheard of. This is something we would like to strongly appeal against. Mr. Ghosn, at the moment, also as a defendant in this case, was preparing for his trial, working together with his defense team, discussing, considering different pieces of evidence and so on. However, with his being indicted once again, well, this means that, well, he is not being held in the equal place in law. After he has been indicted once again, once they are on release, it is forbidden for someone to be, once again, the prosecutors to be in this way. As I just mentioned also, without any logic or necessity, the fact that he was once again rearrested is something which we must say was a very act. Furthermore, in addition to this, there are several problems I would like to raise. The first 2 days ago, I held a press conference here in this same venue, and we said that in April, sometime between April the 10th and 20th, that Mr. Ghosn was preparing himself for a press conference. And while this preparation was made, therefore Mr. Ghosn himself yesterday made the announcement on his Twitter account that on April 11 he would hold the press conference here to put forward his own thoughts, his own position, to speak his truth about this case. He shared this information publicly, and however, of course, this arrest has prevented him from doing this. If, of course, he had not been once again arrested, well, of course, if he is released again, we will continue and go ahead with the press conference as planned on April 11. However, of course, this is now not clear whether that will be possible or not. And this is something, it's, well, a ridiculous situation, but according to his arrest, well, the various investigations and so on to continue with this, all of the, for example, telephones, documents, notebooks, diaries, and so on, which Mr. Ghosn had in his possession, were all confiscated by the prosecutors. As the surface level excuse of the prosecutors, this would be if there is a possibility of any evidence to do with the arrest, then that is something which they would confiscate. However, of course, Mr. Ghosn has been arrested 3 times until now. So all of these related documents have already been taken by the prosecutors on his previous arrests. At this time, according to the different conditions of his release, the only documents he had in his possession were a very limited amount that were directly related to the preparations for his trial. The fact that these were taken goes against his right to a full defense and right to a fair trial in this way. Actually, his wife was with him at the time of his rearrest this morning, and the passport and mobile telephone of Mr. Ghosn's wife were also taken by the prosecutors. She herself is not a suspect in this case. However, all of her materials were also taken by the prosecutors. Mr. Ghosn's wife's mobile phone, of course, contains various private information, also her own communication with her lawyers, these different records, and so on. So these materials, however, well, we did put in an appeal to say that these will not be implied within this. However, saying that, well, to bring from the materials which the defendant has, and to say that this is just for the purpose of the arrest and so on, well, this is something which the prosecutors will not be able to do if he had only gone along for a voluntary questioning. However, I think that we cannot deny the possibility that the rearrest was done for the purpose of taking these various materials once again. I think this is one of the potential risks, and I believe this goes against the principles of the law and what is set forth in the law. And as a civilized country, this is something which must not be accepted. And from today on, in regards to the arrest today and the various, seeking for detention and so on, that the prosecutors are likely to call for from now, we have submitted the various appeals and so on necessary in relation to this. And, well, he's also waiting at the Tokyo Detention Center. But we also sharing the same position as Mr. Ghosn. We will fight against this very thoroughly to the extent. The Japanese prosecutors in this case, well, there were 2 times, 1 time, 2 times, 3 times arrested on the same case on related charges. Considering this, it was already something which was being discussed to be arrested several times on this. But to rearrest someone who is released on bail and to take all of his documents, including those related to the preparations for his trial, I believe that from the eyes of people overseas, from the international community, is something that we also need to consider, and I hope that you will also report on this fact as well.
では質疑応答に移りたいと思います。まずはそのワーキングプレスの方から質問を問いたいと思います。では川田さんお願いいたします。
Thank you for coming. I would like to know why didn't Mr. Ghosn come to the press club and make a press conference immediately after his release and until now? Why did he decided it will be on the 11th of March, not 10th or 12th? So that make us feel strange about the situation. Thank you.
Even before the arrests, he had I've already mentioned that the press conference day will be sometime after 10th of April, and it takes time to prepare. Therefore, we mentioned the mid-April, and we were not aware of the arrest, and so it's the other way around. So we announced the press conference date of the 11th of April. That may have expedited the date for the arrest. So the question was, why was it delayed until the 11th of April to have the press conference? So as I said, the defendant, in regards to the case, to make a public speech is very important. There are things that he is not supposed to speak, and there are things that he has to say for a clearer understanding, and there are things that he would have to mention for the sake of the statement. So there will be time necessary for the preparation and also to recover his physical strength and mental strength for that. So that's why the 11th of April has been announced.
There's Ayako Sato and Mary Joyce.
Tim Kelly from Reuters. So what happens next for Mr. Ghosn? So are you expecting him to be in the detention center for 22 days? Do you expect him to be rearrested after those 22 days and to be held for another 22 days? You know, what can you do to get your client out, and what do you see as kind of the next few steps in this process?
First of all, the prosecutors will most likely tomorrow seek a detention order, and then we will put in an appeal against this. And concretely, this will say that, well, this detention should not be implemented. And if he is to be detained, then we will go forward to appeal against this as well. If our petition there is not successful, then Mr. Ghosn will be kept for 10 days. And on the 10th day, an extension of this detention can be made, and the same thing will happen again. If that is also unsuccessful, then he will be held for 20 days. And during that time, the prosecutors will make their judgment as to whether to indict him on these charges. So most likely after that, the detention will automatically be extended. But at that stage, we are able to submit for bail, and we, of course, will do that if that is the case. When we consider detention, extension of detention, and also the application for bail, these are the different stages that we will, as soon as possible, appeal to the courts to ensure his release as soon as possible. This, of course, is the 4th time he has been arrested, and we believe this is the last card that the prosecutors are holding. Whether there is we don't believe that there is anything that they can do further after this.
Wait a minute.
I just wanted to ask if, in some ways, from the outside world, this looks extraordinary.
Wait a minute. Interpreter can't hear you. Audio, can you lift the audio? We can't hear her, and interpreter can't hear her. You got it?
Is it working?
Is it working? Is it working? Okay.
Sorry about that. From the outside, this obviously looks like an extraordinary and rare situation, but we talked to some former prosecutors earlier today who said the reason why this happened was because he was released on bail, which in and of itself was unusual. Do you feel like strategically or tactically there was any error in getting his release before all the investigation was completed?
There are two principles that I would like to exert. The release can only be allowed after the indictment, and the indictment means that the prosecutors have all the evidence, and there's no room for doubt, and only then the prosecutors can indict, and so that means that they have all the documents and all the evidence ready. So, and the second principle, the release is, and the second part is that the release is the right of the defendant, and therefore the prosecutors for prosecutors not to accept the release appeal should not happen.
すみません、フィナンシャルタイムズの稲垣です。先生、容疑についてもっと教えていただきたいんですけれども、検察から出たステートメントには具体的には書いてなかったんですけれども、さっきおっしゃってた報道されている一連の関係っていうのは、オマーンの販売代理会社に、その代理店に対して送金したお金をご自身のために使った。
And excuse me, sorry, the question is about the contents of the allegations this time, with the reporting, if you could elaborate more upon them. And the other day also you mentioned that you could not give any concrete comments about this because you had not spoken with Mr. Ghosn about Oman, but if he has spoken about this, Mr. Ghosn is completely denying these new allegations. More than that, I am not able to give any more concrete information. I don't have any detailed information, and we also did not have sufficient time to discuss this with him in details as well. But as far as what has been reported, Mr. Ghosn has clearly denied these allegations.
Japan Times の杉山です。すみません。
Sugiyama from Japan Times. Mr. Ghosn yesterday's tweeting. Why did he say, rather than going through the press conference with the lawyer, how did he tweet? Why did he tweet? I don't know really why he tweeted.
Hello, Hans Greimel from Automotive News. You said that you think this is the last card that the prosecutors can play, but there's some discussion about the years that the investigation covers. Nissan's internal investigation seems to think that this Oman connection covers 2011 to 2018, and today's indictment today's arrest only covers 2015 to 2018. Could they break the arrests into two, like they did with the financial filings arrest? In other words, today arrest him for 2015 to 2018, and then later arrest him for 2011 to 2014.
Technically, I cannot say that it would be impossible to do that, but that would be extremely unusual. And I think that it would be likely that the detention would not be permitted if that were the case.
Kanehira from TBS, and Mr. Hironaka said earlier that there may be the additional the indictment, and but you had no idea that there could be another arrest, and Attorney Hironaka has been long been engaged in the this criminal cases, and I believe that you are familiar with the behavior of the prosecutors, and so as the defense team, not having any idea on the further arrest, what do you think about it? Do you think that you underestimated the situation? That the fact that you did not consider that there may be arrest, may be considered as not taking.
Come back to you later.
So I don't know what you mean by the underestimating, for us to be underestimating, but I said is that rearrest should not happen in the first place, and so that doesn't mean that we did not have any idea. That of course we had the idea and we have discussed about it.
I'll take a seat and then I try to come back to you if we have time. Okay, go ahead.
Régis Arnaud, Le Figaro, you mentioned that the passport and the mobile phone of Mrs. Ghosn has been taken from her, do you anticipate interrogation, an arrest, or do you think this is a way to pressure and to push this hostage justice that you've been denouncing since this story started? Thank you.
I'm not sure the answer for that. According to the reporting from the prosecutors, of course, I don't think it was just. I believe that they must have had some kind of reason for this. It was not only to harass. However, thinking about this in a very simple way, the fact that she just happens to be with him at the time, that Mr. Ghosn's wife happened to be there at the time, and that her things were also taken. This is something, of course, which caused her great shock, and which is very questionable.
Hi, I'm from the BBC. Can I ask about the possible trial date? We heard that it was expected that the trial might open perhaps in September. Does Mr. Ghosn's rearrest and potential new charges mean that that date will now be pushed back or is likely to be pushed back? And could that be part of the motivation for the prosecutors to want to rearrest him, to stretch this process even further? And you said that there's, second point, you said that this is not usual to rearrest at this stage and that essentially it's not needed for the investigation because the prosecutors have all the evidence they need. They can re-question Mr. Ghosn if they want to. So what do you think the purpose of this rearrest is really about? Can you speculate at all on that?
Well, there were two questions, and the first question in regards to the schedule, the timing. So on May 23rd, there will be the sorting before the trial. That is the set date, and September is not something that was firmly mentioned by the prosecutors in any case, and so for the scale of the arrest and the scope of the evidence is only something that I can imagine. So out of my imagination, in regards to the schedule of the trial, there will be an influence. And overall, I think the general direction would be for the process to be prolonged. And the meaning of the rearrest, as you asked, for the prosecutor's sake, as I said earlier, it's about to pressure Mr. Ghosn to put him under control and also to stop him from speaking freely. And thirdly, so I would like to go into some specific details to avoid misunderstanding. So this arrest warrant, and at the same time, with the arrest warrant, there's the paper for the confiscation has also been submitted. So, so basically, they took everything that would be associated with the arrest. There's no doubt about it. So only with the arrest warrant they could take these sets of documents. So I think there was a meaning for the prosecutor's arrest.
As possible. Okay, go ahead. Can you?
I'm from Kyodo News. I would like to ask about Mr. Ghosn's situation at the time of his rearrest this morning, having the agents coming in very early this morning, what the situation was, where the arrest warrant was issued, and how he felt at the time of his rearrest. And so I haven't heard details about that. It was very early in the morning, I believe, when the arrest warrant was issued there. However, I haven't heard the details of that yet.
You're working press. Okay, go ahead. No, the lady behind you first. Okay. No. Well, okay, go ahead. Why don't you line up there and ask two questions in a row? Yeah.
I'm from ART in Germany. My name is Kobayashi. In regards to the rearrest today, you've said that this is very unusual, but considering the Japanese so-called hostage justice system, can you clearly say that it is a situation of this? As I mentioned before also, in order to proceed with the investigations, there is no need to bring him in to detain him once again. And there is also no risk of tampering for evidence or flight, as has been proven in the court. So using this, well, within this reason, using this rearrest to put pressure on the defendant, in that sense, I think it is hostage justice. I'm from Nikkei Asia. In regards to the conditions of his release, using the internet was also prohibited for Mr. Ghosn, I believe. However, yesterday he set up his Twitter account and announced the press conference. I would like to ask why this was not stopped. Within the conditions of briefing, Mr. Takano, his other lawyer, is the person who is most in touch with the details on that. However, I don't believe that it was a full banning of usage of the internet.
Hitomi from AP, and the press conference was planned on 11th of April. So suppose that you talked about what would be said in the press conference, and if you claim that the things that would have been said would be real, then so what was being planned to be mentioned? So could you tell us as much as you can? What was supposed to be mentioned? So there was a claim that we failed to consider the rearrest. So we did have the idea that there may be a possible arrest, and so we had recorded in a video what Mr. Ghosn would be saying as a record. So so I don't know whether this would have been the same as what he would be saying. So the minimum statement that he was planning on making was captured in the video for record.
You're working press, right? Okay, go ahead.
I am from the Washington Post. In regards to these allegations, these new allegations, until the last time, well, if this Oman situation is something which came up newly and was not included in the previous charges, whether there was, well, for example, if the prosecutors had new information to rearrest him in regards to this, or was the Oman situation already included? This is something within the prosecutors, and so I'm not able to know the accurate information in regards to this. That's up to the prosecutors. But from our communication with them until now, the Oman case is something which, well, some form of investigation was being undertaken, and, well, something did come into hand in regards to that. Whether that was came in later, and that's why it calls for these new charges, I am not sure, but that is an assumption.
But he's going to have to go, and I'm sure he's going to come back in the near future as the situation progresses. And please remain seated until the speakers today leave the premise. And then thank you very much for coming to the FCCJ. Thank you.